another one that was, to me, I just kept staring at it, was I think it's figure 104 in your book, where you have these steel core columns, which I guess you'd. I mean, it looks like they're vaporizing, but that's not the right word, as you say. It's dustifying. They're there and they're solid, and then they start becoming almost like apparitions, and then they're gone in the same shape.
I would like to point out something here that my detractors often say, "Well, it fell down." So what if it fell down? You still need to explain what happened here, because in the first image, the building is coming apart right next to it and going down or going wherever it's going, and it peels away like peeling a banana, and you're left with these core columns standing up.
Yes.
And they are crisp. You have blue sky in the background, and they have crisp edges. And then you see them getting fuzzy, and then you see just, fuzz there.
Fuzz, but in the same shape, in the same place, the fuzz.
Right. And my detractors say, well, it shook off dust that was resting on it, that had settled on it before it dropped, because it's so fine it hung in the air. Well, if dust is so fine that it hung in the air, how come you didn't see it in the first frame?
Yeah, I was going to say you wouldn't. Yeah, exactly. That.
How did it settle instantly and then hang in the air later? So this argument stands regardless of if you say it fell over. I can't imagine how a 700-foot tall column could drop into a hole in the ground.
Yeah. There was no evidence for that.
And it didn't tip over because it would take out a few blocks worth of buildings.
Right. So there's no evidence for it falling down.
Right.
And going into the whole theory of the controlled demolition, I mean, we haven't really talked about any of the science, but you have very specific, many pages in the book devoted to why even the idea of a nanothermite technology could not have been the source of bringing down of the buildings. Could you go ahead and explain in only minimally scientific terms what that's about?
Okay. In a way, it's that, I like to say by thermite, do you mean powdered aluminum and powdered iron rust? That's what thermite is typically.
Yeah.
And I have no doubt that was there in the dust. Because, that's my point. The buildings turned to dust, and the buildings were made out of steel structures with aluminum cladding. So if that turned to dust and nano-sized particles, that's what you'd have in the dust.
And not only that, you saw this, you were seeing evidence of very rapid rusting of certain of the pieces that would go way beyond any kind of rusting process that would normally happen, as though it was rusting on speed.
Right. If you've ever left an iron skillet in the sink soaking,
mm-hmm.
and you scrubbed it so it's real clean in one area, that area pretty soon turns bright orange
mm-hmm.
from the rust because it's pure iron. Pure iron will rust. Steel structures have that type of steel has other components, carbon and other add-ins that enhance its structural properties and enhance its ability to resist environmental degradation,
mm-hmm.
like from rust. So if this rusts quickly, that means its properties have changed. And if it lets go of these other doodads, like, the iron molecules separate from the carbon,
mm-hmm.
like, the surface is partly dissolved,
mm-hmm.
that would explain instant rusting.
Yes, that would explain it. But what would it take for that to happen, for these molecules to part?
Molecular dissociation.
Yes, how could that happen?
Well, usually molecules are attracted to each other and locked onto each other. And let's say somehow you could turn a switch and cause them to do the reverse, to repel each other.
Mm-hmm.
That is what it looked like was happening when this building kind of billowed out into dust.
What could cause that?
Certain types of energy fields interfering.
Okay, well, we're going to get to that in a second, then, in a little more detail. I wanted to continue on this whole area with the steel beams and the supposed debris and rusting. But the steel, I think we all remember where they said, well, all this excess steel, the steel scrap was shipped to China. Now, what you're saying here is that by September 13th in the morning, so that would have to mean On the 12th? What?
Actually, some of those pictures were taken on the 11th, but they weren't logged in till the 12th. So just to be extra safe, I used the caption date. But if you look at the camera info data, it's the 11th.
Okay, so here we are. People are literally just trying to get the dust off their clothing and shake their head and figure out what just happened to me, what just happened to this city, what happened to everybody else. And at this same time, the steel had already been scooped up and shipped off to China?
Exactly. Pretty good cover story, isn't it?
Well, it's stupid. I mean, that's just stupid.
Towards the beginning, to get a lighthearted moment, I'd say, "Oh, where is that steel? Oh, it's hiding across the street under that hubcap."
Well, and the point is, where was the steel? I mean, how much steel are we talking about here? That was shipped off to China, right? How much? I mean, what did they say they had managed to accumulate and ship to China?
I'm guessing there's 2 beams, because then they could say beams, plural. and not be lying.
So the point is, there wasn't a lot of steel to ship off to China, but what a story. Oh, we had our people on it. We were prepared. We had these massive steel beams, lots of them, piled up, shipped them off to China within 24 hours of the building going down. I mean, when I say stupid, I mean, it's absolutely absurd.
It makes no sense.
It makes no sense.
Exactly. And those columns that dustified before our very eyes?
Yes.
The base of those, I believe, is Stairwell B, and there were 14 people who survived in Stairwell B. The rest of the building dustified around them, and they were left in Stairwell B.
Interesting.
And when they came out, as this one of the firefighters said, I looked and said, "Guys, there used to be 106 floors above us, and now I'm seeing sunshine. There's nothing above us. That big building doesn't exist."
Right.
And he later said, "These are the biggest office buildings in the world, and I didn't see one desk, one chair, one phone, nothing."
Yeah. And yet there was another photo there of something that was showing up in the debris later. I can't remember what building it came from now. And it was just the oddest photograph, because it was of a ball of compressed metal from the Ben & Jerry's store.
Oh, right.
That had little
like a football.
Yeah, like a football that had intact pieces of $20 bills, corners of $20 bills sticking out of this compressed metal. This makes no sense.
And colored dividers.
And colored dividers. I mean,
it was the only file cabinet found.
I mean, how did they even know it was a file cabinet? It looked like a football of metal.
That's true. And they were able to identify what store it was from, and they called up the store owner and said, "Hey, we got your money." And they gave him their money, his money. The Ben & Jerry store owner.
You mean the money that was twisted up inside that football? Or was there some... that was weird. I mean, how can that happen, that you have this densely compacted metal with totally intact pieces of paper sticking out?
It didn't burn.
It didn't burn. And again, the same thing happens over and over. Papers seem to be intact. There were papers floating all over. In fact, papers came down before the dust came down. And this whole subject of paper near cars that had just been not incinerated, toasted. These cars that had been toasted all around are these flutters of paper that had landed around these cars, and yet they were totally intact.
And there's some images where you have this orange glowing piece of material. We don't know what it is, but something orange and glowing sitting on paper, and the paper's not burning.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, we're just now adding more evidence to the weirdness of this whole thing. I'm not asking you to step out on a limb beyond what you've already done, which is huge. But
what I say about that is, we do know that hot things glow.
Yes.
But also, not everything that glows is hot.
Yes.
We can compare a fluorescent light bulb with an incandescent light bulb. Mm-hmm. There's 2 different phenomena going on there. Mm-hmm. Also, there's fireflies that glow.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Yeah. And so there was this phenomena that was occurring. And again, I mean, you have all these people that went through this experience. I mean, we will. I have more things I want to ask you about here, but it's just one surreal, odd bit of evidence after another. None of it stacks up to anything that's been spoken of up until this time. And you had people, Tim McGinn, You mentioned he said to the people that he came in, he was one of the witnesses, said basically, where the F are the towers? What happened? Where's the debris? Everyone was just standing there as though they were in a daze. What just happened? Where's the sound? Where's the collapse? Where are the towers?
This is when they're trapped. Still, those 14 people were trapped in the stairwell. They were on their handy talkies, calling for their buddies to come rescue them. Yeah, where are you? Stairwell B, Tower 1. Where? Tower 1, Stairwell B. What? Yeah. Where's Tower 1? They thought these voices were coming out of nowhere.
Well, there's nothing funny about it, but again, everything about this is so absurd and extreme. And one of the things that you show in this book is when you have a traditional kind of explosion, such as a controlled demolition, you have a certain kind of window breakage and so forth. The signatures of the glass that was broken wasn't anything like a normal demolition, though, was it?
Oh, more than that, very much different. You think about this, just mental exercise. Whether it's pancaking down on its own or you have cutter charges chopping things up and the junk's coming down, whatever the case is, if that stuff lands on the ground, squirts stuff out the side, at that time, if it's taken 8 seconds to come down or 10 seconds to come down, that by the time it gets to the ground, that stuff is squirting out of there at Mach 1 to Mach 2.
Mm-hmm.
And if that stuff is shooting out, we're talking about a soda pop can, everything, it becomes a projectile,
mm-hmm.
and pieces of junk, and it would be all the shrapnel would be all hitting every building around the complex,
right? And
you'd have pockmarks all over. Yet the facade of these buildings is nearly pristine. It doesn't have all this. It doesn't look like it was sandblasted with, or had rocket launcher shooting all sorts of trash at it.
Mm-hmm.
Except we have rounded holes in windows. The
yes.
outer pane, while the inner pane is still intact.
Yeah, that was bizarre.
How do you get a professional glass cutter to even do that?
Well,
I don't think you could.
How would an energy device even do that?
As it turns out, longitudinal energy waves do this. And I hypothesized that, with this, how the mechanics would be. Imagine if you dropped a rock at a pond, still pond, you see the ripples go outward
mm-hmm.
because you've displaced the water laterally.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be, and it would be either round wakes. So if you shoot an energy beam at a window, you might get the same kind of thing rippling outward, like a rock going through water.
Mm-hmm.
When a physical object like a rock hits a window, it bends it, and it kind of bows out, very instantaneously. And glass, because it's a brittle material, can't handle being put into tension, and when it bows out from the rock hitting it, the opposite side is in tension and it breaks.
Mm-hmm.
So what this says is, breaks the whole window. You get cracks all over the place, a
mm-hmm.
spiderweb-like pattern. Anyone who's thrown a baseball through a window
mm-hmm.
Has seen that. The window gets trashed. You don't make a round hole in the middle of the window.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something else doing that. And as it turns out, that can be replicated in the lab with longitudinal energy waves.
Okay, and we're going to go to that again in just a little bit once we get through all the evidence here.